Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey, everybody. My last podcast was an announcement about my upcoming course, and I kind of just went right into it. But I wanted to start off today's podcast with just a little update about me. I feel like that's always nice to do so we can feel connected to each other. And then I will get to today's topic, which is about rightness. So excited to talk to you about that. But like I said, I'll start off with a personal update. And man, team, this season of life has felt so full. I often talk about seasons of life, and usually I mean that sort of more broadly, like a metaphor, like these couple of months or whatever. But I mean this one literally. Like fall has felt like a lot. My kids started school. They are now in elementary school. I can't believe it. They go to the same school now. I can bike there. I love biking them there. One of my sons is obsessed with me biking him there, and the other one doesn't really like biking that much. So I'm sort of like balancing that. But it's been really nice to have them at the same school. And I'm also assistant coaching one of my sons on his soccer team. So I'm really a coach in two senses. Now I'm coaching a 5-year-old soccer team. That has felt like such a wild experience. I was not an amazing soccer player. I played AYSO as a kid, and so it's like me and a lot of soccer dads on these teams that we play, and some of them are super sweet and some of them are very intense teams. So I've got that. I've got a bunch going on professionally, personally, doing some professional development stuff right now, some stuff going on the health front. There's just a lot on my plate, it feels like. So just feeling very full with that. I wonder if you're feeling full with that, or if this is a quiet season for you. So anyway, that's my personal update. In the middle of all of this fullness, I have just been really feeling the sense, especially this week, that I wanted to make sure I recorded you a podcast because I'm running this course in the new year. It's called How to Know What You Want. I'm just so pumped about this course, by the way. It just takes everything that I have learned in over a decade of coaching. I'm synthesizing it into 5 really learnable, repeatable steps. Plus, there's live coaching, and it's all about helping people make decisions and knowing what they want. I just feel like this is such a cool, unique offering versus what I typically do. But since I'm in the process of really finalizing what I'll be teaching in this course and then sharing about this course with my community, I wanted to make sure that I was also talking with you guys on this podcast about some of the topics that we will be covering together in this course. So today's podcast in that vein is going to be about rightness, which I love. I love this whole topic. So today I really just want to do 2 things. The first one is I want to share about what rightness is and why it matters. Like, why do we even care about rightness in the first place? And then second, I want to share, if I've already shared about what rightness is, I want to then share about what rightness is not. I think sometimes understanding how things don't operate can give us a lot of insight about how to cultivate them in a way. And if you know my work, you know that there will be lots of ooey gooey nuance and details and some personal and client examples as we go. So let's do it. Okay, so first let's talk about what rightness is. So to me, rightness is the felt experience of something being the right decision for us, given the options available. It's knowing that something is right, not only because our brain tells us, though our brain can certainly be involved, but also because we can feel it in our body. So that's why I say that rightness is a felt experience. It's not just an idea or a thought. And I want to give an example of that, which I think I've given it before in some other context, either on the podcast or in my newsletter. when my now husband, Gil, and I first moved in together, we were living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at the time. We were looking for a place to rent. We visited a couple places, and then we walked into this one rental. And my body immediately felt open, like inside of it, kind of felt open and spacious, and also kind of like lit up. Like there was an alertness, a certain like things were moving around. I could feel this kind of internal sense of brightness within that spaciousness. That was my rightness in that moment. And I will say that I accessed rightness in that particular moment more quickly than my conscious mind could have, though it did eventually catch up and it noticed that there was nice wood floors there. And in fact, that living room had a really nice big bay window that let in so much light, and it had space for a small bedroom for Gil and I, and then also 2 small offices, which was something we really wanted. And I will say that particular experience that I'm describing was a very fast experience of rightness, and it was a very clear one, and there wasn't a lot of fear or concern or pushback from my brain in that particular example. That place that I'm talking about happened to be in our budget. Gil liked it too. It was very easy, but it was this and continues to be a very vivid example to me of how rightness can manifest. And it's very important to say, not every experience of rightness is like that. Sometimes it comes more slowly. Like I sometimes describe it as like something appearing out of the mist. It becomes clearer over time. Sometimes there are genuine fears or concerns or hesitations in the way that might make our connection to rightness a bit harder to access. But the common denominator, however quickly it comes, however many things are in the way that we have to kind of move out of the way, is this felt experience of, yes, this is right. I think all of us have had this experience at least once in our life, probably more if we reflect on this. And I know this because rightness is something that I talk with clients about all the time. And of course, I'll give the caveat here. Just because I am talking about rightness as a felt experience, it doesn't mean that the brain isn't involved. I do think that rightness absolutely, without question, involves the brain. But my understanding of the neuroscience of things like intuition, which of course is related to this, right, is that it tends to involve, quote unquote, lower, or that could be called more primitive parts of the brain versus our prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the part of the brain that we are consciously aware of. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of conscious awareness. So, to give a different kind of example, if you feel a sinking feeling in your gut about something, but you don't know why at first, it's not that like a magic fairy put that sinking feeling in your gut. It's not magical. It somehow passed through your brain. It was just passed through a part of your brain that you didn't have conscious access to. It's a deeper part of your brain. So part of what rightness, I think, taps into is some deeper parts of knowing. And of course, I'm not against the prefrontal cortex being involved. It can just sometimes be a little slower to arrive to the party. But ultimately, we want all parts of us to be on board and have that felt experience of, yes, this felt experience that this has rightness, this feeling, it's got some goo to it, this sense that we are making a choice that is right for us. And given that definition, I think it is reasonable to ask next, why does rightness matter? My take is that I think that rightness matters because I think on some level, rightness is what we're all seeking on some level with any decision that we make in our lives and every decision that we make in our lives. In any given moment, we might think that we're trying to maximize savings or efficiency or career progression or being as fashionable as possible or making as many people as happy as possible or whatever we think we're maximizing or minimizing on. But ultimately, what we are seeking is that it feels right to do that. And my belief is that finding rightness is not just an outcome. It's not just something we achieve. It's also a skill that we can become better at. And if we can do that, if we can become more skillful at feeling into where the rightness is for us in any given situation, we can end up with lives that are both much more likely to be satisfying to us because we're of course, making more and more decisions that are more and more right for us about things big and small. That's obviously super important. So on one hand, we're doing that. That's very important. But also the process of getting there, getting to rightness, becomes far less exhausting and fraught and dramatic and messy, which is also very important because obviously it's very important to have an outcome that has rightness to it. But if the process of getting there every single time is miserable, whether we're trying to assess rightness when we're picking an outfit to wear to our cousin's wedding, or we're trying to assess rightness when we're deciding whether or not to quit our job and start a company, then if each of those decisions is anxiety producing or exhausting or whatever it is, then our lives become anxiety producing or exhausting or whatever it is. So our capacity, our skillfulness at being able to accurately hear and follow our own rightness, then that will shape every moment of our lives, big and small. Well, it's just landing in me as I say this. I feel this in my body. Do you feel this? Because our lives, on one hand, are just one decision after another, aren't they? So that's one argument for why rightness matters. And I also want to give a slightly deeper take on this. Now, if this isn't your jam, feel free to leave it. But I would say that one possible philosophy for how to live, we could even call it a spiritual philosophy if that's of interest to you, is to say, how can I listen to and follow rightness? I'm going to say that one more time. One potential philosophy for living, we could call it a spiritual philosophy, is to say, how can I listen to and follow rightness? Some people might call that way of being, that connection to rightness, a connection to a higher power or even to a God. I have clients, both who were members of specific religions and also clients who considered themselves to be just sort of generally spiritual people who found this to be true. They found that connecting to their sense of rightness helps them feel more connected to their spiritual life, more in alignment with a higher power, whatever they happen to call it. But also, if you're someone for whom words like spirituality feel like a little fluffy or even woo-woo, I think rightness is all that you need. I think the importance of this can be right here. They can be felt in this moment and very concrete. Because the more that our choices have rightness to them, the more that our lives feel right. On a personal level, in some ways, my entire career as a coach has been about helping people locate and follow their rightness. Even when I was doing eating coaching very early on in my coaching practice, the people who I would work with, they were, maybe eating emotionally or using food on some level as a way of trying to seek a life that felt more right to them. They're trying to seek what they need and want. Obviously, it's really not working with them. Obviously, they were in some ways kind of detached from rightness. And what they actually needed was a more direct hookup, which is basically exactly how I coached them at the time. I helped them find what they actually needed and wanted. But this larger question, what are the skills required to find rightness? It's really always been there in my work. And if you know anything about my very personal story, a huge chunk of my personal journey has been about finding ways to get in touch with my own rightness. What do I want in a given moment? And also, what do I want with my whole life? And to get all the things that are in the way out of the way. Because man, can things get in the way of accessing our own sense of rightness? I'm going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes. I think it's really important to name that I was not a person who came by this naturally. I know some people who seem to just kind of get it intuitively. I am not that person. My brain or my sense of, quote unquote, what other people thought was impressive or, just, quote unquote, what other people thought I should do. All of those were more the dominant force there for a lot of my adult life. I had to learn so much of what I now know about accessing my internal rightness kind of piece by piece. So I would say that I am a self-made accessor of rightness. And those of you who listen to this podcast a lot will understand that reference. I have worked for what I have. So I would say if you want to learn from somebody, I'm a pretty good person to teach you. So, which is what I'm trying to, do one piece of on this podcast, even just by defining rightness, what it is and what it isn't. So with that kind of intro to what rightness is and why it matters, I want to then talk about what rightness isn't, because I think that's really important and revealing as well. So what is not rightness? Here are 5 things that rightness is mostly, I'll say mostly, not. Number 1 is static. Rightness typically isn't static. And by that, I mean that a choice, a decision can have rightness to it, and that decision can shift over time. Rightness is not something that once felt or understood is written in stone. I shared in my newsletter recently a bit about my fertility journey and how the decision that I both, my husband and I made to try for a child, it changed over time. It shifted. It was one thing at one time and then it changed over time. And I'm not saying that it changes over time in like a whiplashy way. Like if your sense of what's right is completely different at 10 a.m. versus 1 p.m. versus 3:30 p.m., I think you kind of haven't quite landed on it yet. And we will talk a lot more about that and how to find something that's a little bit more grounded and solid in that How to Know What You Want course. But rightness is not just one thing that never, ever changes. We change, the information that we have changes. It makes sense that rightness would change too. So that's number 1. The second thing that rightness is not is binary. It's typically not true that there is a right decision and a wrong decision. Taking this job will be right and not taking that job will be wrong. Occasionally that happens, but what tends to happen more often is that rightness exists along the spectrum. Like lots of options have rightness to them and also some wrongness too, if we want to add that variable to the mix. In fact, I think that's part of what's really tricky about a lot of life choices is that, many of the choices, even choices you may end up not choosing, they have some rightness to them. So it's not like, oh, this one's right and that one's wrong. It's about sifting through choices that all have rightness to them and assessing where the most rightness is. Ooh, that just lands in my body as I say that. This is a really deep conversation, guys, right? So rightness is often not binary. That's the second thing I would say that it is not. The third thing that rightness is often not is loud. I mean, and again, I'll say this with all these, sometimes it is, and obviously it's very convenient when it is, but also it can be quiet. And when it is quiet, it is very possible to ignore it and push it down with busyness, just being busy or food or screens or whatever your pleasure button of choice happens to be. And this is especially true if our rightness is not something that we're hooked up to on a regular basis. So if you're not getting like rightness signals, probably like multiple times a day already, then your connection to your own, rightnessometer, if we want to call it that, is probably a little atrophied. And a more positive way of saying that, of course, would be it could definitely be stronger. So you need tools and practices that will help you strengthen it and help you hear it, even if it is a little bit quiet. I talk about a lot of ways of doing this already on the podcast, and we will be talking about it even more in very practical terms, answering questions, coaching on that in this course. So that's the third thing about rightness. It's not always loud. The fourth thing that rightness is not is formulaic. Rightness is not always formulaic. What I mean when I say this is whatever pre-existing formula you think you have about, how rightness can be achieved may not be true. Like you could have a formula, let's just say that, if I plug in minimize cost and maximize sunshine, that should be how I get to the output of the right way to spend my vacation. But how you actually want your vacation may not really work out that way. Of course, again, sometimes it does. Sometimes your pre-existing formula is just right, but often it doesn't. Often our priorities, what feels right in terms of our priorities, are kind of different than we would expect. So I'll give a client example here. I have a client who kept insisting to me that she was taking some time off work, that she needed to get back into the job market because she was trying to solve for maximizing her revenue and minimizing how difficult it would be for her to get back into the job market later. But ultimately, as she got in touch with her rightness, she found that, what was really right for her was prioritizing some other things. And obviously, maximizing revenue and minimizing difficulty of entering the job market, those are really, you know, probably good things in, just in and of themselves. Those aren't bad priorities, but they weren't what her priorities truly were in the moment. They weren't the priorities that had rightness for her in that particular season. So, after she actually figured out her priorities, you could perhaps create a formula of sort, but the formula was more emergent. It kind of reveals itself in the process. Eventually, you kind of understand the key variables, but you might not know them cognitively in advance. So that's number 4. Rightness is often not formulaic. And 5th, and this is so important to say, rightness is typically not perfect. I love that. And I mean perfect in the sense that it's typically not true, or not always true, that it's like, oh yes, this choice will make me perfectly happy. Because let's call a spade a spade. Sometimes you are choosing between shitty options. Sometimes your back is against a wall and you kind of hate your options. And I will also say that in my experience, sometimes when people tell me my back is against a wall and I hate my options, they're kind of like making it worse than it has to be, because our brain is telling us, we should do this, or only this is possible for us, or we have fearful thoughts about what might happen if we do X or Y. We're going to tackle all of that in my upcoming course for what it's worth. But also, it can be true at times that there is no option that we are thrilled with. Or, and this is also, sadly true, that we are living through a genuinely challenging or bad or cruel moment in our lives, personally or in history as a whole. And even then, maybe especially then, there will be an option, a choice that has more rightness for you. Just letting that one land. Even then, perhaps especially then, there will be an option that has more rightness for you. So that's number 5. Rightness is typically not perfect. And those are my 5 things that rightness is not. And if you're listening to this and thinking, man, this rightness stuff is exactly what I need, but what do I even do? How do I get started? How do I access the rightness? I keep getting afraid. My brain keeps getting in the way. I never take action. I love this. I love that you're asking questions like this. There are a lot of ways to proceed, but I'm going to be honest. I'm launching a course literally right now, so I'm going to plug that for you. Honestly, the fact that so many of us need support in this area, the fact that all this resonates so much is kind of exactly why I am putting together this How to Know What You Want course. If this podcast, honestly, a lot of my podcasts speak to you, I would strongly recommend joining us in this course. It has all of my best insights on this topic. It is structured in such a way that you can put the ideas into practice quickly. It can give you new insights and new ways of approaching your life quickly. I think you would probably love it. It is 8 weeks. The live version of this course is going to start in January, which, let's be honest, is kind of like the best way to start the new year. I personally think, don't make some crazy resolution you won't follow through on. Just join us in this course. I do want to flag that enrollment for the live version of this course is going to be November 10th through 21st only. I will be offering it up again for enrollment at some point in the future, but it will be primarily pre-recorded at that time and the price will go up. So if you're listening to this in the future, you can still join us. Go ahead and go to katiesiever.com and you can learn all about it. But if you were listening to this in November 2025, I would recommend just joining us now. That is my recommendation. You'll have lifetime access to all the materials, so you can listen now or listen later. You can get the early bird pricing. You can get the chance to be coached by me live if you want it. So I personally think this is the best time to join. And also, I just feel like it's such a unique opportunity to work with me in this way. I just think everybody should jump on it and join us. Everything you could want to know about this course is on my website at katiesiever.com. And I really hope that you'll join us. And with all that in mind, I just also want to finish by saying that I'm rooting for you in the day, in the week, in the year ahead. You got it.
If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.